mysteries and all the hot impressions and routines. But we're here for the numbers as well. So let's get statistical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, so welcome on in, everybody, to the SNL Network live on this Monday night, here to talk about the career of Kyle Mooney. It is the last of our career retrospectives for now. I mean, you never know. Maybe we find out somebody else is leaving, in which case we'll have to do this at least one more time. But we have gone over the careers of Kate McKinnon, Pete Davidson, Aidy Bryant, and now Kyle Mooney we're going to do tonight to talk about their times at SNL. What are the best moments, the best sketches, and what is their legacy to the show? I mean, that's a big question that we like to discuss as fans. So we have had some great panels for all of those shows just a few weeks back. Last week, we weren't live. We were off for the long weekend, both in Canada and in the United States. We had our draft podcast that came out. It was pre-recorded, but it was a great show, about 3 hours of drafting hosts that have never hosted SNL before. In case you missed that show and you want to go back and catch up on it, it was a really fun one. We had 8 panelists on that show, and you can vote right now on our social media to say which team won the draft. The stakes are extremely high for that one, so make sure that you go ahead and vote. And I would love to introduce the panel we have here tonight to talk about Kyle Mooney, and one of the guys who was on that podcast last week was the great Sammy Kay. Sammy, how are you?
I am doing well, John. This was a last-minute call to fill in for tonight's episode, which was a great call to get because, Kyle Mooney has had such a fun, interesting career on SNL, and I'm excited to talk about some of those sketches. And yeah, like John said, if you haven't voted yet in the draft of the never hosted draft, consider looking at my team. Giving me a shot here. I was told whoever gets the lowest amount of votes will not be participating in the show next season. So really just got to get those numbers up for me, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah, you were not cut for time this week. We did bring you on the show. So welcome, Sammy. Joining us on the podcast as well tonight is the wonderful Victoria Franso. Victoria, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really great. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on Kyle Mooney, to hear what you think of his legacy. So we're going to get right to that, Victoria. I'm looking forward to it. And then also joining us for the first time on the SNL Network, you may have heard her on an SNL Hall of Fame podcast or two beforehand. It is Kirstin Turnbull. Kirstin, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm fantastic. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Kirstin, I think you're our first panelist that's Canadian besides me. Like a regular panelist, I'd say. Yeah, we've had some speakers that are Canadian, but yeah, well, welcome. Exactly. Well, welcome to the show. Kirstin's going to be joining us a lot more in the future and into season 48, so I'm excited to have her on the podcast. And are you ready to prove yourself tonight, Kirstin, about why you're going to make a great SNL Network panelist?
Yes.
Okay, looking forward to it. All right, so let's talk about Kyle Mooney and his time on the show. Obviously, he had been on the show a very long time. To me, it was a little bit of a surprise that he was even on season 47. You would think Beck Bennett left the show at the end of 46, probably gonna, leave as well, but he was there and he had a very interesting season. Was in a lot of roles this season, surprisingly. Usually you think of Kyle Mooney, you think of somebody who's kind of like a little bit of an accessory to the cast. He had his moments. He had his sketches that I think were specifically on brand for Kyle over the years, but this season was a little bit different. And I think we'll talk about that when we get towards the end of our podcast today. As always, we'll attempt to go chronological while we talk through it. But before we get to going through the timeline of Kyle Mooney's time at the show, would love to talk about, your overall feelings about his time in the cast. So Sammy, let me send it over to you to kick things off. How are you feeling about Kyle Mooney as a cast member?
Kyle is such an interesting cast member to kind of look at his career on the show. Over the last couple of days, I've been kind of revisiting a lot of his sketches. And, for as a lot of the SNL community kind of says, at least towards the end of his run, like, SNL never really figured out how to use Kyle. He had a lot of time to shine on the show when you really go back and look at the corner he was able to kind of carve out for himself. It was incredibly niche. It's not something that was everyone's cup of tea, but every couple of episodes, he would be able to get his opportunity to kind of give his brand of comedy. And, he joined the show when I was a freshman in college, and I just remember, immediately. It was probably, and we'll probably get into the sketch soon, but like the Miley sex tape sketch, in his first couple episodes was one where I'm like, this guy is so weird. He's got such a mix of being overconfident and terrified in almost every sketch he's in, the typical Kyle Mooney character. So, it's been really interesting to see kind of the spotlight he was able to get on the show, and it's something that I'm glad he was, Lauren and everyone at SNL was able to do and to bring him in.
Sammy, I mean, I think he was one of the most awkward cast members that have ever been on Saturday Night Live. Like, that's the word to describe him. He's just awkward. His sketches are awkward. His characters are awkward. And sometimes the awkward works really well. Personally, we'll talk about this. I think the awkward worked really well at the beginning of his career because he was so new and so fresh. And I wonder if that faded a little bit over time. But Victoria, let me send it over to you. What were your thoughts overall on Kyle Mooney's career at the show?
I think awkward is the word I was going to use as well. Awkward, but I personally loved it. It was a consistent awkward throughout his career. And for me, that worked all the way through. I really think that again, to use Sammy's word, he had a niche comedy persona. And I think they use it really well when it was the time. I don't think it was overused. Sometimes I do think it was underused, but we'll chat about that in a little bit too. But I love his like underdog, like lack of self-respect characters, where he's like awkward. And I'm going to name a few sketches in the next bit, but like one right now is like with Jason Sudeikis and Ego Nwodim, and just how he is like, that's my wife, man, and I'm not going to really do anything about it. But yeah, I loved him. I think he completed the puzzle of SNL. I think there was, we all need an awkward dude, and anyone can play that, but he did it extremely well. And that's Kyle Mooney's touch. And then his hair is great. So that's all.
Yeah. I mean, great hair. That was probably the first thing that I noticed when I saw him for the first time in season 39. And we will get to that first episode of his. But Kirstin, over to you. What were your overall thoughts on Kyle Mooney's SNL career?
My summarization of it is underrated.
Okay.
And in the last couple of weeks, while I was, rewatching sketches, and there are compilations of his kind of greatest hits and all sorts of ways that you can kind of view those. And when you look at them all together, it's quite a catalog. Because I there's Will Ferrell compilations and all the, the big stars that we know of, and those are great for a laugh. But when I was watching his, I was consistently laughing the entire time. And I thought, he's kind of snuck in there. I wouldn't have, looked him up to look at his, super cut of awesomeness, but it was really good. And so underrated is the word for me. And I am a huge fan. And that type of cringe comedy, I'm a fan of.
I sort of wonder, underrated is an interesting way to describe him, because that makes me think that over time, people will look back more fondly on Kyle Mooney's career, maybe than it was while he was at the show. And, through the exercise of us preparing for this podcast, we started to do those things. I mean, there was, for me personally, I think I have a pretty good encyclopedic knowledge of a lot of Saturday Night Live, but to go back and watch some of the early Kyle Mooney stuff, there was things that I forgot about how much, how well he integrated himself. And it's a really good transition to start talking about that beginning of his career, because, let's put our minds back into the beginning of season 39. So this is 2013, September 28th to be exact. And season 39, episode 1. And me personally, I had gotten news that Saturday Night Live had hired 6 new cast members: Kyle Mooney, Beck Bennett, John Milheiser, Mike O'Brien, Noel Wells, and Brooks Wheelan. 5 white guys, 1 white girl. That mix of things probably will never happen again. But I will say that it is the most experimental thing that Saturday Night Live has done in a very long time, where they just added in this influx of new talent to the show. I believe Tina Fey, when she hosted that first episode, called it a rebuilding year for the show. And that's because Bill Hader, Jason Sudeikis, Fred Armisen, they had all just left. Andy Samberg, Kristen Wiig before that, Will Forte before that. Seth was going to leave later that year. It was just like the core was leaving, and they needed to find new talent. And I know for myself, I had known Beck Bennett. I had seen those AT&T commercials, and then as a result of that, I ended up looking up Good Neighbor stuff, and then I found Kyle Mooney and Dave McCary, who would go on to marry Emma Stone and be a part of the show. And they ended up having a pretty big impact. And you can see right away, early on, how Beck and Kyle just had this advantage over the other people that they were there with. John Milheiser, Mike O'Brien obviously had his niche. He was a writer and then ended up doing all this film stuff. Noel and Brooks. I mean, there are fans of those people, but they just had this like impact on the early episodes of season 39 and season 40 that were unlike the new talent. So let me start with what happens on that first episode, and then we'll get some commentary from the rest of the panelists. And basically, this is the fun first sketch that we get to see of Kyle Mooney, where Tina's episode is so incredibly meta. They bring out all of the new cast members for the monologue, and she introduces them and says, this is the new talent. She makes them dance. She makes them her bitches. And this is what she does when she brings them out for the monologue. And they're all dancing behind Tina Fey as they're there for the monologue. And it's really fun as she goes from cast member to cast member to introduce them onto the show. And they have to dance as a rite of passage. And you would think that would be it, because at the end of the monologue, Tina Fey says, okay, that's it. That's all you need to do for the night because you're featured players. But then we get this very famous sketch, which we're going to talk about next, called New Cast Member or Arcade Fire. And this is a very fun moment where Kenan Thompson is the host of the sketch, and Tina Fey comes out, and Tina is supposed to guess whether the contestant is a member of Arcade Fire or a new cast member. And we do have Kyle Mooney coming out first, wearing a Boston Legal t-shirt with his very famous hair, looking super awkward. And we get this incredible moment from Kyle Mooney.
Hey, Tina. Or should I say, salutations?
No! Do not do that! No silly voices. Not here.
which is just incredible. And right away, that was the moment when I really started to love Kyle Mooney. So Sammy, do you remember that moment, new cast member or Arcade Fire?
Oh yeah, I totally remember that when that aired back in 2013. Just that concept for a sketch alone was really funny, being, as you were saying before, very meta, very, self-aware of kind of like where the show was at that point, bringing in all this young talent. And yeah, when I was revisiting that sketch, this past weekend, hearing him say that line, that is such a classic Kyle Mooney-ism that he is, kind of, brought out that kind of awkward voice. I think he said like something along the lines of like, oh, salutations, in some of the SNL universe, pre-tapes he would do. So yeah, it was really interesting to see, like, right from the kind of jump that, with like one line, you're kind of able to get like a thesis statement for the kind of humor that Kyle would bring to the show.
For sure. Kirstin, do you remember that sketch? Were you watching at the time? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I do remember that. And what's interesting is, you're right. If you think about that kind of Kyleism and how he came out with that awkward but still confident, as you mentioned, Sammy, salutations, that actually, now that we know him after all these years, was the perfect way of saying, this is what my ride's going to be like, because he would do that now and we go, oh, totally Kyle. He introduced us to himself in one word.
Yeah, it was really amazing, and it really had more impact than some of the others. I think Beck actually did take a little bit longer to get familiar with stuff, and he ended up, I love Beck Bennett as a cast member, but it took a little bit longer than Kyle in a way. Victoria, how did you feel about those early moments that we saw from Kyle Mooney?
I mean, I remember that sketch, and he just like this the whole time, being very awkward. But there was that confidence to him, and I was like, and I knew, you could kind of tell, like, from the get-go, he's going to be fun to play with and kind of all in. And there wasn't really a shyness. He was very, very cool. And yeah, no, I think that was the genesis of what was to come. And we were like, okay, this is what we're going to get. And we sure got it from him for the next 10 years. Also, this makes me miss college a lot because that was my prime. And that's when Kyle and Mike O'Brien, all them joined. So I peaked.
Yeah, well, and I get that, and I think like you and Sammy could definitely relate on that. I mean, for me, like I was just going through this moment where I was sort of in denial that none of my favorite cast members were on the show anymore, and I was just waiting to like somebody. And I have to be honest. I mean, Kyle made it very easy to like him very early on, so I love to continue to talk about some of those moments from earlier on in Kyle's career. Sammy, let me start with you. Was there something that you would like to talk about? We talked about his first episode a little bit. Anything from those early days of Kyle Mooney?
Yeah, I already alluded to it before, but let's talk about the Miley sex tape pre-tape. To my knowledge, this was his first like straight up pre-tape on the show, I think. And if you guys don't remember this sketch, basically Kyle playing himself has this problem that Miley Cyrus, who I think was either the host or the musical guest that week, really wants to have sex with him. And it's like becoming a huge issue that she wants to have sex with him. And Bobby Moynihan and Beck Bennett are, again, playing themselves, trying to, kind of knock some sense into him and be like, what's the problem? And like, it just was the starting point of those kind of behind the scenes through the lens of Kyle Mooney sketches that we would get so many of. There's just so many funny lines to that sketch. One of them being, saying how like, oh, she's about to pour water over her sexy t-shirt and gonna have a wet t-shirt contest. And I've been named the head judge. There's just so many really funny things about that one. I know they brought that back once or twice, but I really enjoyed the Miley sex tape sketch.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So this is happening on the second week of him being a cast member where Miley Cyrus was hosting. And then it did happen 1 year later, or maybe 2 years later, actually in 2015. So I do have some clips that I did pull from this because it's very funny. And then I want to get Kirstin and Victoria's opinion on this pre-tape because this is early meta Kyle. We get to see behind the scenes in the SNL universe a bit, which we're going to be talking about a lot more. So here's Kyle Mooney and Miley Cyrus from that first pre-tape.
Oh, what's going on? Are we going to have sex right now and whenever you want for the rest of your life?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. Please, be respectful.
So good and so funny. And then the next time we have Kyle and Miley's wedding, and this is what we get.
Hey, Kyle, do you and your friends want some of my extra money?
No, they're fine, Miley. Drop it. Oh, every single day.
Do they want some of my money? Can you email me their routing information?
Which Kyle, who was like, he would even admit is not like the best impressionist, but like I thought that was pretty good. Kirstin, how did you feel about the Kyle and Miley pre-tapes we got?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I watched the wedding tape one again today just because I enjoyed it so much. And yes, his impression is bang on, when he imitated her. It's funny, he wasn't even playing so much awkward in that one. I think we just clearly are seeing like someone punching above their weight who would be married Miley Cyrus, but he's actually not being so awkward. He's just kind of cool with this ridiculous problem. It's all of the little things that I think we love about him. It's every facial expression. It's the kind of hesitant speech and all the verbal tics and stuff that make it hard to watch in such a nice way. But this one, I like that he almost played it a little bit straight and kind of cool, who just had this ridiculous, silly scenario that he was trying to get out of. I love that one. And Miley's always game for stuff. So
that's a great point because to contrast that to what we saw with him with Ego Wodem later on that Victoria had referenced earlier, or him with Leslie Jones, which we will talk about. It's very different Kyle that we got at the beginning in this Miley stuff. Victoria, how did you feel about the Kyle and Miley pre-tapes?
I mean, chef's kiss. They were, Miley Cyrus, I think, is a very good person to be on the show, like celebrity wise, because she's down for life in general, but and that energy is really translatable into her work on SNL. That mixed with Kyle Mooney, I feel like I'm going to describe things as Kyle Mooney from now on because he's his own kind of like entity of how he pulls in different like characteristics of awkward and confident, all that stuff put together. But no, I think it was super fun. And I'd have to agree completely with Kirstin too.
I agree. Yeah, for sure. Victoria, do you have another moment from earlier on in Kyle's career that you would like us to talk about?
Yeah, I think this was season 39. It's called Awkward Flirts with Vanessa Bayer. Come on. It's so good. From the very beginning, would you like to get more groceries? And then to the very end of like Beck Bennett be like, you want to have sex? And she's like, sure. And then he finally asked her out on a date. And she's like, I'm going to have sex with this guy. But then, I'll see you later. And that I think is funny because that was his first season. But then to his very last season in Parent Teacher Conference, it's like the same thing. Someone else is about to like be with his, exactly. Be with his woman. And he's just very funny about it. He's like, okay, like, sure. And like I said, that's that consistency that we've seen from him. And I think it works every time. I've never rolled my eyes at it. I've never been like, oh, this again. I think it's very funny. And that also was just like a showcase of like what we're gonna, or not showcase, but giving us a taste of what we're gonna see from him later on. It's very
what's
Kyle.
interesting is I think the reason why we don't roll our eyes is because they're also smart, and that there is a commentary on how people are dating and interacting and how people in that age range, singles, are behaving with each other. So although all those moments of cringe are so deliciously beautiful and hilarious, the poop in your underwear, like, come on. And Vanessa Bayer.
Kirstin, hold on. I got this for you.
Okay.
Poop on my underwear. Why did I say that out loud to you? That's.
I feel like I always have poop on my underwear.
No, well then I guess
unavoidable.
Two poos in a pod.
which is a great line in my opinion. But yes, Kirstin, sorry. Please
continue.
My
gosh. Well, I don't know that any of us have had that conversation, but we've all been in a conversation where it's just stuttered. Like it's just not. Yeah, it's off the rails.
Well, speak for yourself.
Some of us
have.
I'm just kidding. Well, poop on your underwear. There you go. We've all been there, and it's been horrible. And he just threw gasoline on that for us to enjoy. But then, it got awkward and weird because it's this really kind of odd young person flirting and mating type behavior that we're also watching. It is like National Geographic in a really strange way, like watch the male as he tries to interact with the female and like we're watching them do their awkward mating dance.
For sure. Sammy, I mean, tell me if this is a hot take or not, but is this Kyle Mooney's greatest sketch ever?
Ooh, that I don't think it's his greatest sketch because there are a couple later on that I want to, maybe give that title to, but it is definitely like a top 10 sketch of his. I think being able to see him and Vanessa Bayer balance out that like meet cute, like again, we've said awkward many times on the show, but like they both have their own brand of that. And they were able to, in this sketch, really complement one another together. You were, Kirstin, talking about how like this is really smart about, parodying sort of like, real life relationships and stuff. But something that I think is a through line through Kyle's career is his the way that he's able to take like pop culture tropes and like movie tropes and TV tropes and really just mine them for so many great laughs. And this is like a really solid like rom-com parody too. And it's really great that we got this sketch.
And the sincerity is what I love. Like both of them perform that skit with so much sincerity. And it's so sweet. And that's what makes it work, is that they weren't, I mean, we know it's going to be funny, but they are so genuine in their dialogue with each other.
Yeah, I think Vanessa, she complements that very well too, just as an actress herself. She's had those when we do that retrospective, but like she's had those moments too. But I think Vanessa's characters complement Kyle's too. And I think it's also purely intentioned. Like they're just like, it's a weird innocence to it almost. Innocence is a weird word to describe poop in my pants, but like, you know what I'm saying? but yeah, I think they
It's
were
like
complimentary to each
naive,
other.
very naive, and sort of like wide-eyed,
Yeah.
sort of, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we're
like
all on the
not
same page. We're like
and
four
have a
poos in a
pure
pod.
heart.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Well, if somebody would like to check out the sketch and they haven't before, because maybe you weren't watching SNL during season 39, his first season, it is a really great one. So I actually do think this is probably a top 2 or 3 Kyle Mooney sketch, for me at least. And it is from season 39, episode 17. So you could check that one out. Awkward Flirts. Kirstin, what about you? Anything from earlier on in Kyle Mooney's career that you would like us to talk about?
I think throughout his career, he really started parodying like awkward TV shows, silly TV shows, like real world style shows. I don't know when that started, but I know that that happened a lot. So he had The House, and he had different guests appear on those.
Yeah.
There were a few like that I like how he kept doing that, and he just started leaning into them and like picked up all of the tropes that we talk about when it comes to sitcoms and cartoons and YouTube videos. And he was really plugged into the mediums that young people were creating content on, and always really having fun with those and the characters, the personas of the folks that were using those.
Yeah, Ken brings it up in the chat, which is great, that there is a cut Andrew Garfield pre-tape that really kicks things off late in season 39. So it is earlier on in his career, but the first canon version of this, The House, that we get is in the Chris Hemsworth episode in season 40 of SNL. And yeah, this is like a real world parody. And I'm a big reality TV fan. I'm a reality TV competition shows and stuff like that. And for me, this was absolutely hilarious, going to the, seeing what's happening and then getting the Beck and Kyle confessionals where they talk directly to camera. And these ones are really fun. There were 3 that did air early on. And it's another example of what Kyle Mooney was doing with the pre-tapes. We talk about this post Lonely Island world. Who's going to fill it? There's a lot of comparisons now between Please Don't Destroy and The Lonely Island. But to bridge the gap at the time, it was either Mike O'Brien, who was starting around the same time, or Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett. And they had several different types of pre-tapes, including The House. So let me play this one.
Eric and I were planning on ordering food. Would you want to get in on that?
Wait, Eric and Chase are ordering food? Now I'm thinking maybe I want to order food too. I'm really confused.
It's like so dumb. But they definitely had their moments. Sammy, do you remember these pre-tapes?
Yeah, I mean, these are ones that during my rewatch, I kind of totally forgot about. They're not ones that I like necessarily go back to very often. And, obviously they did it 3 times, and the basic premise is pretty much the same. Like, the roommate is really torn between like what Kyle wants to do and what Beck wants to do, and there's like some sort of miscommunication, but it's always the dumbest thing. Like, I know there was one, maybe it might have been the Chris Pine episode or the Will Ferrell episode, where Kyle wants to go see a movie at a theater and Beck wants to see a movie at home, which is as someone who's a big seeing movies in theaters fan, it's I really relate to that one. And it's just so stupid. It's just so dumb. And going back to like kind of like the tropes that he's really good at picking up on, obviously like the editing that goes into all these pre-tapes really are a huge part of the comedy. And I know that Beck and Kyle have such a big influence on that from their Good Neighbor days. And, that is something I definitely want to highlight. Like, sometimes like these premises and sketches on paper, like the actual jokes aren't like hilarious, but the way that it's all cut together and it feels like, they really like nail it on the head, like what they're the show or the movie they're trying to emulate. That's like where like the real like laughs for me come from.
For sure. Victoria, how did you feel about The House and some of the other pre-tapes that we saw that were these like Beck Kyle creations?
It was, I guess, a glorified continuation of Good Neighbors. I feel like they also, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it was an interview where like they pulled like inspiration from Good Neighbors. So it's cool to see that kind of continue on. If you watch Good Neighbors, it's very funny. I highly recommend Chris. It's just like a Kyle Mooney, essentially monologue. Yeah, I think they were great. The reality stuff, it really shows their generation, if that makes sense. And like, the things that were trendy when they were younger. And I love that they brought that to SNL as well, because it just makes it all the more relatable. And they didn't really get to do much of that, like, I would say like early 2000s stuff too much on the show when they were on, but they brought that stuff in. Like there's another sketch that I'll probably bring up in a few called The Race, where it's like, you can tell like they watch those style like TV shows growing up. And I just think that Beck and Kyle are really good about like bringing things that they loved growing up into the show, but making it like modern and relatable and something that all folks can enjoy.
Yeah, put a pin in that. We're going to talk about The Race in a little bit, which is a very, very funny pre-tape. I think one of the better ones that we saw. But I think that what was so interesting or fascinating about ones like The House versus some of the other pre-tapes we saw earlier on is this one was more put together, more of your typical SNL style pre-tape that looks really freaking good. But a lot of the pre-tapes that happened earlier on in their careers were like grungy and, you know, a Good Neighbor-esque, like Victoria described, but like we're just different looking than some of the pre-tapes we were getting during the Lonely Island era. And I'd love to talk about some of them together because I think that makes the most sense to do it. You know, we started getting these ones earlier on, and these were probably the first ones that we got. There was one called Beer Pong, which happened in week 3, the 3rd episode, where they come in and we have Jay Farrow, you know, trying to play beer pong against Kyle Mooney, and he's explaining the rules, and it's all very weird.
Call the cup, then you have to whistle a song. Doesn't matter what type.
It's just a chance for us to learn what makes you a very special and unique person inside of you.
And just the way that they communicated in some of these pre-tapes, Beck, Bennett and Kyle Mooney, is that the lines were funny, but they were so dry. There was like some dry humor to them when they would do stuff like this. And then they also had this one, which I saw was brought up in the chat a lot tonight, which was Inside SoCal. And let me bring that one up.
And you're watching Inside SoCal, where we give you the inside scoop on the SoCal lifestyle.
And these ones were always really funny, especially the stuff with Jonah Hill and Bobby Moynihan playing Jonah Hill's dad in this and getting mad and trying to figure out what they were doing.
For our top story for tonight is Amanda Burns' little sister Sarah is moving back home, and I heard she still looks good.
And just the way that they would describe stories and stuff like that in this sketch, there was something, like I said, so dry, not over the top, no so obvious about it, but it was in the dialogue specifically that made these things work. And I'll just bring up one more for good measure while we're talking about this, because then we could discuss this as a package, not a Patrick. But this transitions me over to Chris Fitzpatrick, which was this I guess punk guy who was running for class president, and we got to see 4 of these sketches as well. Here's a little bit of Chris Fitzpatrick.
I'm a simple guy. I lost my virginity when I was 16, but I'd done other stuff before that. I'm friends with blacks, Asians, and Mexicans. I don't see color when I look at a person, but no offense, whites make the best music.
And they would just play this like this music that was like, this was all stuff that if I didn't know better, I would have thought was done in the early 2000s on the show. But it wasn't. This was done in like 2013. And Victoria, I see you nodding your head, so let me go to you first. How do you feel about, you know, the packaging we got of some of these other pre-tapes?
No, I mentioned it earlier. They really took what was like trendy and what was going on when they were growing up, and they really brought it to SNL. And I think it's really great because it gives us, the audience, of like, oh my gosh, I remember stuff like that. Like, gives us, you know, a little bit of nostalgia too, especially now as we're, you know, in the retrospect, like looking at Real World and all those other types of shows, like, oh wow, that was kind of cringy, but it's so funny. Yeah, I love this style. Yeah, I think I hit most of it. Yeah.
Sammy, what about you? Anything else from these pre-tapes?
Yeah, the Chris Fitzpatrick one was, I didn't realize how many times he brought that back and like kind of manipulated it in different ways. There's like one like really later on, like a couple seasons later with Brie Larson, where they're I forget like the exact premise of it, but they're just like I think they have a band, like they have a punk band. And yeah, I just, you know, going back to like what I said before about like just the editing, like he just captures that like cringe 90s, early 2000s culture beat so well. You know, right around the time like he joined SNL, I started getting into like, I started going back and watching his old YouTube videos, like good, you know, The Good Neighbor, the ones like Outrageous Fun, and Toast. Like these are like so like cut from the same cloth as those. So it is interesting to like look back at those early ones and see, you know, how long that style lasted and how they were able to kind of, you know, make it more not like mainstream SNL-y, but like, you know, not as good, not as YouTube Good Neighbor-y, if that makes sense. Like the transition of it like throughout his career on SNL was interesting.
Quick
That totally
shout out
makes
to
sense.
Beck. Sorry, quick shout out to Beck Bennett's hair. An outrageous fun. That's all. Goodbye.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I believe the one you're referring to with Brie Larson is what they were trying to make a Kickstarter. I think that's what it was.
Yes, the Kickstarter. Yes, they're like trying to make a movie, like called like Johnny Shadow or something like that, and it's ridiculous.
Kirstin, how did you feel about some of these other pre-tapes we saw earlier on?
I loved it. If he's looking to elevate the cringe factor, he does it in really clever ways. The kind of stilted dialogue, it's just all such weird intonation. And so that deadpan delivery, it throws us because it's so strange to hear someone intonate things in such a different way. And he picks up on all of those different sensorial pieces, like every saxophone interlude, the laugh tracks, the oohs, the ahs, and the edit style, which is really unpolished and clearly, you know, quickly edited because not your priority. Like you're just trying to do this with your friends in the basement. It's such a contrast to today where we all probably have multiple apps on our phone that allow us to be content creators and do things that look fantastic. You can edit movies on your iPhone. So this is definitely a nostalgic piece where, you know, it reminds me of, I'll age myself, trying to record something on a cassette off the radio and trying to like record and pause. It's that clunky, but that kind of is what makes it really fun to watch. It's, yeah, someone's holding the camera and it's moving. They don't clearly cut their dialogue properly, so you hear people talk over each other. All those things that we would not have now.
And you know, me personally, I wasn't a huge fan of some of the mumbling that we were getting from Kyle Mooney at the time. I did find that as an SNL, you know, as SNL characters are concerned, I feel like there is a little bit of a difficulty, you know, watching them because they don't pop. Right? Like there's nothing about them that makes you want to show this to all of your friends because there's nothing like overly over the top and exciting. And I know that maybe that's not Kyle's brand. We get that from so many other people. Why do we have to get that from him? So I see both sides to it. I think he's probably one of the best mumblers in the history of the show, but sometimes it was a little bit much for me in some of the characters that I felt like were a little bit too mumbly. So I want to just, you know, say both sides, you know, when we're talking about that stuff. Okay. There's a couple other things that I do want to make sure we discuss. He had some update characters that I think will be important to talk about, and we will get to those. And then there, you know, obviously there's a ton of other pre-tape work because I think that pre-tapes and update is really kind of what you saw from him moving from that point forward. Season 39, he comes out and he's just really one of the best rookies, and then, you know, sort of blends in or blends back into the cast at a certain point. And then we really start to see, when are we going to get this Kyle Mooney pre-tape? It will probably come like, you know, once every 2 or 3 episodes. And then there was a couple update characters for sure we're going to get to. So let's go around the panel one more time to bring up some of those moments. Sammy, anything on your list that we should go to next?
Specifically like weekend update, right? Like something.
Whatever you want. If you want to go pre-tape or you want to go weekend update, but I just want to, you know,
for sure. I mean, I think it is due time we talk about Bruce Chandling, probably his most well-known. Sorry, Victoria, and the most well-known weekend update character, you know, next to Baby Yoda, of course. But basically, as someone who's like a big fan of comedy, Bruce Chandling like really worked for me. I was actually amazed to see that like he had Bruce Chandling on his first episode of the show on Update, which was like crazy. And the way he like kind of was able to take like just like almost like an anti-humor approach to the character, where just like the worst, most cheesy, corny stand-up jokes. You know, the jokes never necessarily hit, but it's always like his reaction and everything. I mean, that's the point. The point is for the jokes not to hit, really. and his reactions to everything were so like specific and lived in that it like was just, I couldn't, like, no matter how many times he brought that one out, I like, it killed me every time. So yeah.
This was super impressive for me. I sort of forgot that he did Bruce Chandling on the first episode until I did my rewatch and I saw this. I knew that Bruce Chandling was such a big part, but the fact that Saturday Night Live let a rookie cast member come on their first episode and do his character on there that they would eventually bring back a ton of times. You know, at the time, it was really, like I said, a lot of those main male cast members have left the show. Bobby Moynihan and Taron Killam are, you know, and Kenan Thompson are sort of the main, you know, male cast members at that time who are doing update pieces where you had, you know, Drunk Uncle, which was on the same episode as that. And then to have Bruce Chandling come on and do his thing, to me, he totally held his own in that first episode. And I'd love to get the panel's thoughts on Bruce Chandling a little bit more. But let me play a little bit from that first Bruce Chandling all the way back in 2013.
Bruce, I gotta say, seems like you got a lot on your mind right now. Of course, everybody these days is so obsessed with CVs. Okay.
And, you know, if you don't remember the premise of Bruce Chandling, he's this stand-up comic that comes out, he starts doing his comedy, and there's this typical shtick. And then all of a sudden, there's just this moment where he gets so introverted about his life and realizing, like, what is he doing with his life? And it gets sad to the point where you start to feel bad for this character. And then Seth, or later Colin, would come in, and then he would come out and go back to his thing. And that was, you know, that was Bruce Chandling as a character. Victoria, how did you feel about Bruce Chandling? I know you were excited to talk about him.
Yeah, he was on my list. I was going to say, you know, kind of echoing what you said earlier, of very impressive that that was a character he brought out on his very first episode, and one with Tina Fey. And folks, you know, like, I'm sure they went into that episode. It was premiere, Tina Fey with a lot of eyes gonna, you know, watching. And the fact that they let him do that was impressive, and it speaks to his art and his abilities. He's just like a sleazy uncle type, you know. I feel like unless it's just me, but like, I feel like we all have that type of uncle who makes those awful, awful jokes. And he's like, I think it was that episode, or that, yeah, his first time doing it, where he's like, Los Angeles, you know, the city where I can spend $200 on a decent cup of Joe, like very much an uncle like type humor. And then I think it was season 43 where he does like Why I Love Thanksgiving. Again, more of those like uncle jokes bringing to the table of like, I love corn on the cob. The Indians call it maize, as in maize I have a second like helping or something like that. But yeah, I think Bruce Chandling was one of my favorites. I can go on about his corny jokes. But yeah, no, I think it is great.
And I'll just say it, I wouldn't have hated having Bruce Chandling back this season one last time. I think that would have been fun to see. I think that would have been a great, you know, wrap up if we were going to get some other things. Kirstin, how do you feel about the Bruce Chandling stuff?
Oh, I love that character. That you really go on a roller coaster with him, right? Where you're like, oh gosh, and you're like, oh, you know, oh, he's nice. No. And it takes me back to one of my favorite old time awkward stand-up comedian characters, Jeannie Darcy. Molly Shannon. Don't get me started. Don't even get me started. Like, just again, the weird intonation, just like performing in an old folks home with the most inappropriate off-base jokes, not meant for that audience. And so I've always loved that, and her very funny take on how awkward stand-up comedy can be and the performance of it, and people that maybe shouldn't be doing it. And so that's where my head goes. So I love them both. And there is a connection there for me on that style of character.
Yeah, it's a great callback. I totally agree with that. That's great. Victoria, what about you? Any pre-tapes or anything else on your list that you want to talk about? We'll sort of move down the timeline now a little bit and talk about some of the stuff from the middle or towards the latter half of Kyle's career.
Can we talk about the race a little bit more in depth?
Of course, yeah, let's do it.
I mean, again, I've said this probably like a few times now, but like, it so shows like his generation, how old he is, when he grew up, what he watched on TV, and not just him, Beck as well, because Beck's also a key star in this too. very much Kyle humor. Wouldn't expect anyone else to do this sketch too, of like, I used to run around, and then there was like the hole in the pants.
Well, Victoria, let me just say for any of the listeners who don't remember this sketch, this is a pre-tape that happens in season 43, episode 7, with host Saoirse Ronan, and it features Greta Gerwig in it as well. And this is a pre-tape that among the fan community was widely celebrated. So please continue with some of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and just like it goes to he does, again, consistency is key with him, but like I'm not really confident, but self-aware, but then he plays a lot of those underdog characters. The wig was great, but like his natural hair is better, but close second for that wig that he had in there too. But of just like those corny, like, I'll race you to get, what was it, like paperwork that they were going to race for his boss, and then she's like, oh, I just came in early, and they're like, okay, cool. Like nothing happened. It's very Mooney of him. So I'll let other folks speak to it because I'll get excited, and my take's very elementary.
No, not at all. Kirstin, over to you.
I am actually just chomping at the bit to talk about beers.
Okay, let's do it then. Yeah, sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Sammy, you don't have race comments?
Okay, so Sammy, you want to talk about the race?
Race is great, but I would love to talk about beers because beers is one I really want to talk about. So I'll let you take it.
I think there's a group of folks that can do cringe well. And I would so Kyle Mooney is in that group. Larry David, John C. Reilly, Steve Carell. Sure, there are others, those are the ones that are coming to mind. But so to see Larry David in that, again, pre-tape kind of sitcom tropey stuff, it has weird B-roll that makes no sense. And again, he's commenting back to all of those weird interstitials from those sitcoms we used to watch back then. The saxophone solo in between scenes, the really short, weird scenes. And then that horrible laugh track with like, ooh, and then the scripting is just so good. Where were you? I was at the park. I called the park. It's so silly. But beers, to see those two together, it's just magical. I want more of that. I want more of people like Larry David and John C. Reilly and Kyle Mooney playing off each other.
Yeah, that was really great. So this was a 10-1 pre-tape that we got from the second hosted episode of Larry David in season 43, episode 4. And yeah, this goes in line with some of the ones that we were talking about earlier, like The House. And there are just so many that Kyle did over the years that didn't come up at the time. But Kirstin's totally right. I mean, the awkward nature of this is absolutely fantastic. Sammy, did you want to comment on beers?
Yes. I love this sketch. When you were asking me about awkward flirts before, if that was like his best sketch, I think Beers, for me, might be his best sketch. There's still a couple other contenders there as well. But of all of the 90s sitcom parodies he did with Beck, I think the first one was with Chris Pratt in his second season. But of all the ones he did, which a lot were cut for time, I think this one was my favorite. Seeing Larry David interact with them was just like a joy as someone who is such a huge Curb Your Enthusiasm fan. Obviously, him coming back to SNL was such like a cool homecoming experience, but being able to play in this sandbox with Kyle and Beck was so fun to see. Just like Kyle and Beck were just able to get Larry to like say the most ridiculous things. He's like, I think he's like either Beck or Kyle's cousin, and they like want him to watch their fish while they go on a bike ride. And like Larry David, unfortunately, is addicted to beer, and he's like, beer is the only thing that matters to me. And he, is like playing electric guitar, and he's knocking over the fish tank, and just so many funny visual gags in this sketch. And it's just like such a specific world that all of these sitcom parodies they did were able to create, and just a lot of quotable lines. And I'm really happy this one exists.
It's also my favorite. And again, going back to how smart these are, like at the end of that sketch, Larry David's character admits that he's an alcoholic. And much like all of the like super fluffy sitcoms, they're just like, cheers, and that's it. Like, we're not going to dig into that. We're not going to unpack this. There's no real, character study here. It's, your 30-minute sitcom episode. We keep things light and fluffy. And that's what it was like. People got into serious trouble and we didn't talk about any of it, which is really strange. We just brushed under the rug, went right past it. And this, again, commented on that with the closure and the ending of it.
Yeah, Victoria.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't rewatch this for the retrospective, but it's not like I don't remember it and that like parts of it aren't burned into my brain of like when Larry David throws the chair and Kyle Mooney's like so stupid. But like same thing with that ending, like doesn't Larry David stab him and they're just like, that's it, like no big deal.
I think that last line is just like, oh, okay, let's drink. Like Kyle like has like a six pack, he's like, okay, let's drink, and it's just like rolls the credits.
Yeah, no, I think also my favorite part of that was like it's very like remind me of Full House. Like in between, they would show like cityscape or whatever, but there would be like a little girl sitting there, like a dog eating ice cream, or like giraffes, like very not relevant to the show and like the plot, but like loved it because it was very, very 90s sitcom. Yeah, I can't believe I didn't rewatch that, but parts of it are burned in here for life.
Ingrained. Yeah, and Ken in the chat also did bring up Cars, which was a Cut for Time, a pre-tape with Claire Foy. That was a Full House parody. That was very fun as well. Or Full House style parody. So yeah, I mean, those were some really funny pre-tapes. I think we need to talk about the Kyle Mooney, Leslie Jones cinematic universe that we got. That is such a big part for me of Kyle Mooney's career that we started to get. It really starts in season 41, so 2 years into his career, where we get to me, this is like the precursor to all of this, the Kyle Mooney versus Kanye West pre-tape. Not sure if the panel remembers this one, but Kyle wants to challenge Kanye West to a rap battle. So he goes up and raps and does his Kyle Mooney thing. And then Kanye does this whole rap, which is funny now, about the old Kanye versus the new Kanye. What's the real Kanye? And then Kyle gives us the confessional to the camera after and says this.
That was the biggest mistake of my life. I just destroyed Kanye in a rap battle, and now he's probably really sad.
Yeah, I'm sure he was. And and this sort of kicks off like the behind the scenes. I mean, we had the Miley Cyrus stuff early on, but it sort of starts to lead us into this cinematic universe when we find out that Kyle Mooney and Leslie Jones are secretly dating.
Well, I was thinking like maybe tonight we can take it to the next level.
You know, I've never gone all the way.
I'm gonna take care of you.
And I don't want to take away too much from the panel, but we can talk about how the world sort of builds, where we get these like universe events that are happening throughout the SNL season. We do find out that Kyle and Leslie have a baby together, little Lorne. There's also the whole Colin Jost thing, because at the time Leslie Jones and Colin Jost are having this flirtmance on Weekend Update. And then Kyle's obviously not so thrilled about that. So we get probably the funniest moment for me of Kyle Mooney's entire career in one of the pre-tapes, when Kyle Mooney is watching Little Lorne's recital, waiting for Leslie Jones to show up, who then shows up with Colin Jost, and this happens.
Oh my God! Did we miss it?
I'm so sorry. We were working on a script and we got carried away. It's my
Colin.
And shoots Colin Jost right in the leg, and then everybody's running from the studio, and you just get this amazing shot of big Lorne, real Lorne Michaels, who's just looking at the camera in complete deadpan as to what's happening. And there was about 6 or 7 of these Leslie Kyle sketches, and I wish every time I got them, I prayed for more. So Sammy, as an MCU fan, how did you feel about the meta nature we got of the SNL cinematic universe?
I love the SNL cinematic universe. It's, as someone who we always talk about as longtime fans of the show, we love it when there's references to old sketches, or we get, a monologue where they go behind, the host takes you, backstage and everything like that. And these Kyle and Leslie sketches were like that to like the nth degree. And to me, I mean, I do want to backtrack a little bit to the Kyle versus Kanye one. That is definitely like a top 5 Kyle pre-tape for me. He's like, Kanye West, man, that stinks. Grab a mint. You need to freshen up your Kanye breath. And it's just so many great lines there just to see, especially after, the last year, Kanye and Kyle face to face is very funny. But also in these Leslie and Kyle sketches, for me, I know we're talking about Kyle, but the way that Lorne was game in these sketches to me were always so funny. I think in the first or second one, the whole plot is that Kyle like hasn't lost his virginity, and like Leslie wants to have sex, and like he hasn't lost his virginity yet. And there's like just a talking head of Lorne kind of just being like, I really think it's important that Kyle loses his virginity. And it's like being cut in between that interview and like Kyle like doing magic tricks and just like being really bad at magic. It does like say a lot, I think, about Kyle and like his career on the show, that like Lorne was like so game for those, and like really did like some ridiculous things in those pre-tapes. But yeah, those were great.
They were fantastic. Victoria, how are you feeling about the cinematic universe we got for a few seasons between Kyle, Leslie, and all the characters?
I think I tweeted during the final episode, I was like, I just want one more Leslie and Kyle, just like for old time's sake. That was probably one of my favorite things that they did. I really love the Beck and Kyle pre-tape where it's like the masquerade party and they like switch and it's the rose and everyone's taking turn. It's like beating up Colin. And then it ends up like, oh, Colin decided not to like press charges, and it was great. I love that. It's also like having Lauren beat up Colin Jost in that too is and showing how, as Sammy mentioned, how game he was to participate. I think only Kyle could do that to that level. So really love those. What was I gonna say? I think I really love the Pete Davidson one where he like dyes his hair and gets the tattoo just to try to like get Lorne Michaels. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about when he like goes up to Pete and like shakes his pills in front of him. So yeah, no, I think those were great. Man, I'm getting sad because I'm gonna miss him, but it's okay. He'll do other things.
Well, that's what we're here for. That's what we're here to talk about it, to give some people some joy for people who are gonna miss Kyle. Kirstin, so how did you feel about these different pre-tapes we got?
I love them. I love that there were certain cast members that are, I think, as personal brand became a thing, we started to get to know people more. So like, I feel like we got to know Kyle. Now, he may not be at all like this in real life, but I feel like I got to know him more than like a Kate McKinnon. I feel like Pete Davidson, great example. We all clearly know him outside of the show, and he brings his whole self to work. Kyle seems to bring his whole self to work. Leslie Jones also, like, out there, right? And so I think that's what helped those storylines, is that we felt more invested in them as people and them as characters, blurry lines at times, because they were being very open and vulnerable in telling these stories, whether they're fake or not. We got to know them more than other people on the show, other cast members.
Definitely. I love that they also, like I said, had these events that were happening. I think they had like an SNL winter formal at some point. They had like an SNL prom, like these things that were happening. They were like, oh, we're all getting ready for the whatever it is, as if these are like part of their high school experience. And that was really fun for me. And of course, obviously Leslie Jones would go on to leave the show and we wouldn't get to see more of these, but we did have some other Kyle backstage moments over the last couple of years. One in particular, we had him with Issa Rae at the beginning of season 46, where we find out that Kyle has COVID.
Okay, here's your stuff. Please leave, sir. Yeah.
Well, what can I say? My life is random.
Okay, don't talk to the camera.
Sorry about that.
Which was really great. And then, of course, we had one this year talking about going on holiday right before the Christmas holidays, where Kyle said this gem of a line.
He still calls me Beck Bennett.
which is fantastic. I love these meta moments that we are getting from Kyle Mooney, of course, with the backstage stuff. All right, let's go around. Let's talk about some other sketches that are on your list that you want to make sure that we talk about. Kirstin,
Hoagies,
over to you to go first.
pepperonis.
Okay, tell us why.
That to me feels like the epitome of the Kyle Beck friendship, working relationship. It embodies all of that. They are both silly. They both have great character work, silly scripts. They feel like two 12-year-old boys getting to live out some lifelong dream, which I think parallels nicely the fact that they both got onto SNL together. I mean, it's how many people get to be on that show, and these two best friends who do comedy together both got on the show. So there were some really fun parallels there between how they were portraying these, two not so young people that got this job at this pepperoni joint, and their enthusiasm around it. And then Leslie Jones, who played it really well and really straight and contrasted nicely. I just love that it felt like watching what they probably felt like when they both found out they were going to be on the show IRL.
Yeah, that's one from 2016. That Pogie Pepperonis one is definitely worth going back to check out. Sammy, what about you? Anything else on your list that you want to make sure that we talk about?
Yes, because this one might. I know I've been saying a lot about like what's the best Kyle Mooney sketch. This one might, like at time of recording, this could change. Might be my favorite. This is from season 45, the Adam Driver hosted episode Del Taco Shoot. This sketch is. Oh man, I'm all out of cash. You're saying it like a pervert. It's like the amount of me and my friends will say when we're like going out to dinner or something like that, we'll say, "Oh man, I'm all out of cash," like all the time. It's become like a part of our lexicon, and like this like feels like when I first saw the sketch and when I rewatch it, it feels like such like a old school comedy sort of flavor, similar to like a Who's on First, What's on Second, like Abbott and Costello sort of thing, where it's like so simple. It's just like Beck telling Kyle how to say a line for a commercial, for a Del Taco commercial. And like the line couldn't be more simple. It's all man, I'm all out of cash. And the hell and torture that Beck's character and Adam Driver's character, who's like a ad executive, put Kyle's character through is just incredible. So yeah, I love this sketch.
Yeah, and we did talk about this one, Sammy, a bit during that Superfan Takeover where we did the catchphrase bracket, and this was one of the catchphrases that people voted on. And we were saying at the time, there's not many SNL catchphrases nowadays. Like, that we had Say For Me this year, but it's really rare that we're getting some solid catchphrases. And "Oh man, I'm all out of cash" is something that people have been referencing since that sketch happened. So that is a really great sketch that we get. Victoria, what else is on your list that you would like us to talk about?
This might be random, but Christmas Bar with Casey Affleck. It's like, I don't know why that was one that sticks out to me. Maybe my personal favorite, not a popular opinion. I totally understand. But just like, I know I'm nothing special, but like like your eyes sparkle, and then like Casey Affleck I love the games, if that makes sense, of trying to one up each other. And then I just realized how many stabbings are involved in like Kyle Mooney, like, because like they just start stabbing each other. The Larry David stab, the Pete Davidson one. I don't know. Maybe I love the violence. I'm just kidding. Scratch that. Don't quote me on that. But yeah. No, Christmas Bar. I love the game of it. I think that Kyle does those games very well too. And that same thing with like, I'm all out of cash, building that game as well. It's like a comedic rule of like threes, but he does it in different beats too. It's really hard to shake like Kyle Mooney in his underwear, like jumping, saying like, I'm all out of cash, but like, alas, here we are. But no, I think that specific one demonstrate his ability, his like comedic ability to like be, again, consistent, as that's going to be like my word for Kyle Mooney, but in a way that's fun. And it shows off like one of his like weird characters that he's able to do, especially as like a Brooklyn, weirdo.
Yeah, I mean that's another really good. I think someone in the chat sleeper pick. That's a really good one. That's season 42. So really great for that one. And you mentioned Kyle Mooney in his underwear, and I think this is something that we have to talk about, which would be one of my favorite Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett sketches. Let's talk about Brothers for a second, which is so fantastic. We get Liev Schreiber, who was there, and then I believe it's James McAvoy after that. So we get two of these sketches, and they basically Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett are brothers who come down while their parents come down the stairs while their parents are having some get-togethers, having some other couples over, and they're there in there's these long t-shirts and underwear, and they are these two brothers who are extremely competitive, and they're trying to show off for the other people that are visiting their house. And every single time they step out of line, they are shot with a hose, and it is like so great. It's one of the best breaking sketches, I would say, over the last decade of the show, where the cast members are breaking, and it actually, to me, adds to the sketch because it is so hilarious to watch. The level of physical comedy here, where Kyle Mooney is so competitive, he ends up, I think first he breaks a plate over Beck Bennett's head, and in the second sketch he breaks a chair over his head, flies out the side of the stage as well at one point. This is just such a great sketch. I always laugh when I watch it.
Mrs. Campbell, is this a dance? Mr. Miss Campbell, which one's a dance? Which one's a dance, Mr. Mrs. Campbell? That's not the dance!
It just, to me, I love it, and I love it just in comparison to some of the earlier stuff we were talking about with Kyle and how it was so subtle. Like, this is so over the top. This to me is like sparks my funny bone, what I look for from Saturday Night Live that you can't get on any other show. I loved every single moment of them just spraying the hose in their faces. Sammy, do you remember this one?
Oh yeah, and watching it again today, like I was breaking just watching it at home as much as like Cecily Strong and AD were breaking during that sketch. A great break from them. I love how in the second one too, they like, obviously it's very repetitive, but James McAvoy brings out the leaf blower to like dry them off. And he's like, well, I'm not going to like just let them like, run around the house like sopping wet. Like, oh, that like checks out. Yeah, very just like you said, like the physical comedy of it all is great. One line going back to like kind of the meta nature of like Kyle and Beck's history on the show. Maybe I'm like reaching, but I don't think I am. In the second sketch they did, Beck is about to throw Kyle like in through the TV, and he goes like, live from the Super Bowl, it's my brother, and like throws Kyle into the TV, and I'm like, nice. Like you just have like if this dynamic wasn't good on the comedy alone, like you throw me a little nugget like that, and I'm like, all right, great, like thank you.
Oh my God, it was so funny. Kirstin, Victoria, I want to give you a chance to talk about this if you do want to talk about it. So one of you have anything on the brother sketch? Just
Brilliant. One, I think my brother has the same, or he did have the same exact Bugs Bunny t-shirt that Kyle wore from the 90s. But two, it's like, I love, and I think it was the James McAvoy version where like they start kissing to like make up and then they go upstairs. And like their stupid dance. It's great. That's all I have to say. I'll give Kirstin the table.
Yeah, they are very in touch with their 13-year-old inner boy. Like I have a 13-year-old boy, so I can verify that it gets very awkward when him and his friends are just like sitting there talking. It's crazy conversation. It's bizarre and silly, and they can tap into that, which is really fun. That sketch was probably a little polarizing because if you like Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett, they were going all in on these crazy characters. If you are not a fan, that one probably wouldn't have been one you loved because it was pretty wacky. I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoy all of them. Let's just say that. I enjoy all of them. And that one was good. It was fun and yes, legitimately awkward because they acted like a bunch of little brats.
Yeah, I could just picture you with your son's friends, Mrs. Turnbull, the whole time dancing.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. All right, let's do one more round of anything else that is on everybody's list, and then we'll talk a little bit about how Kyle Mooney finished up his career and what his legacy was to the show. So, Sammy, let me send it over to you. Anything else on your list you want to make sure we talk about tonight?
Ooh, I'm in between two. I think I'm gonna go with this is a real deep cut. At least I thought it was. 50 Shades press junket.
Oh my
sketch
God,
with
yes.
with Dakota Johnson. So yeah, Dakota Johnson is basically playing herself, promoting the new the first 50 Shades movie, and like she's like just sick and tired of like doing press all day. But then she like kind of perks up because like a child reporter named Peter Scott Finley, who always gets the scoop, especially if it's ice cream, comes in, and it's Kyle Mooney as like a little boy news reporter, and is just as a kid reporter just asking the most explicit questions about 50 Shades of Grey. And there's a really great line, like so many great lines in the sketch. And Dakota Johnson and Kate McKinnon, who I think is playing like the PR person, they're just like appalled that like this little boy was able to see the movie. And there's this one line where he's like, so like your character, doesn't play Xbox. I think he asked if she plays Xbox, and she's like, no, I don't think my character plays Xbox. He's like, oh, you don't play Xbox, but you play twisted games of sexual domination. Just like so many great lines. So yeah, bit of a deep cut, but we've talked a lot about pre-tapes tonight, and this is like a great example of a live sketch of Kyle that Beck wasn't in, because there weren't a ton of those that were we've talked about.
Okay, I just have to say, I love that you brought this up. I didn't think anybody else would, because to me, this is also a very deep cut, but this is absolutely one of my favorite Kyle Mooney sketches. This is a sketch that nobody brings up ever, but I did pull a clip from it because it is so hilarious to me. This happens right after the SNL 40th anniversary show. So the Dakota Johnson episode, probably a little bit overshined by the momentous occasion that preceded it. But this is a moment from a character we got from Kyle Mooney that I actually wish we saw again.
Then uses an ice cube to trace along the body of your curves, pausing at your exposed breasts. I gotta ask, was it cold?
And Dakota Johnson's face in this sketch is absolutely fantastic. If you have not watched that one, please go back and do so. It's really great. Victoria, what about you? Anything else on your list you want to make sure we talk about tonight with regards to Kyle Mooney?
There was just like one. I mean, I think I can talk about it when we wrap up because it's from the last season. It's what was it called?
Well, you can do that now. That's no problem.
Okay, I was going to talk about the Dream Guy. I think that was just like a very nice way to wrap up his career. It's very much everything he's done. But it's also like a character, and he's also the underdog, but he's confident and self-aware. I think it was it was an ending because it wasn't the last thing he did on that season, but I think he was just like, take your time, sweetheart, take your time. Just like his character voices. I think it was his last chance to shine in that way. So that was one of my favorite sketches of his in the last of his season. So yeah.
Yeah, and this was a really interesting one that I think was a little bit controversial, where this was in the Kim Kardashian West episode, and we had him basically playing this actual suitor for Kim, and then we had a ton of cameos at the same time, and it's sort of began this interesting season for Kyle Mooney in his last season, where he just became this utility player in a role that we'd never seen him before. And I thought it was just fascinating to think about him in this role this season that I thought he was okay at, but probably it was the time for him to move on.
I also will say it reminded me of the Chippendales sketch from like very long ago with Patrick Swayze and Chris Farley. It like very much reminded me of that. But of course, like in today's world of like, oh, like, of course, like, all these hot dudes, and then it's like Chris and Kyle, but they're very much considered for, to be a dancer for the Dream Guy. It just reminded me of that too. So I think that's also why I kind of loved it and wanted to bring it up. But I think it's encompassing of Kyle and his talents, but it also kind of is a nostalgic feel of like some things SNL's done in the past, but in a different way. So yeah.
Okay. Kirstin, over to you. Anything else on your list you want to make sure we talk about tonight?
Yeah, I do have one. When I think about this sketch, I think it would be a great one to show people who aren't familiar with his work that would encapsulate how you would know this guy, and that would be Bits.
Okay.
Awkward friend, the guy who cannot find the right comedic timing for anything. He's still hanging out with the crew, but you roll your eyes. If you watch that, we all know that person in our lives, and you could really say that's basically a degree of who he brings to all of his sketches. And if you know that it's that guy, now you have some sympathy for him when he's flirting, him when he's engaging or trying to woo someone, and that gives you a good idea of kind of where his headspace is when it comes to how his characters fit into sketches.
Yeah, that's a very good one. For sure. And yeah, I mean, look, we said it many times, awkward is the word for Kyle Mooney, and he did some great work both in live sketches, but mostly in pre-tapes. I think that is just, his career is going to be defined by that. And we'll talk about it when we do wrap up his legacy. And Sammy definitely stole my underrated sketch for Kyle Mooney with the press junket sketch from Dakota Johnson. But I guess the only thing that we really haven't talked about from his career, I was going to cut it for time as per usual, but there is, he did play Baby Yoda a few times on the show. So that is something that I know that didn't work for everybody, but worked for some people. I think that the only thing I will say about Baby Yoda, which is not personally my favorite character, but the first time he did it, I sort of think it worked. After that, I'm not sure if it did. Here's something from the first Baby Yoda we got to see, which was really his mark on Weekend Update throughout the end of Kyle Mooney's career.
Baby Yoda's what's popping right now. Hell yeah!
And yeah, he did do that pretty well. Sammy, anything you would like to say about Baby Yoda?
Yeah, I have said on the show before that I am a Baby Yoda slight defender. I think that for me, the thing I liked about the character is just the simplest thing is just like funny costume, funny voice, and Kyle being overconfident with sprinkles of like pop culture and entertainment industry talk, like having beef with like Baby Groot. Like, I don't know, like it's definitely like low, at times could be low hanging fruit, but you know, and would I have not needed to see it 6 times? Sure. But, you know, I'm not mad that he did it.
Yeah, and I sort of felt that the Baby Yodas, because we got them 6 times, that they started way earlier than they did, but they actually only started in December of 2019, which sort of makes sense, right? The character isn't that old. But yeah, I mean, look, all respect for him that he continued to push this. And this was really, to me, how he sort of said goodbye to the show, was doing the Baby Yoda in the Selena Gomez episode. Obviously, we didn't know at the time that he was leaving, but to me, this was sort of his formal goodbye. Obviously, we ended up getting big goodbyes for Kate McKinnon, Pete Davidson, and A.D. Bryant, and sort of this tepid goodbye for Kyle Mooney, where he comes into this gray pigtail sketch in his last episode, being, you know, fulfilling this role as the ultimate utility player. He comes into this last sketch with this moment.
What can I say? Can't ride a bike with no handlebars.
I know Sammy loves that. And we do get this line from Kate McKinnon about knowing him for the last 9 years and stuff like that. So there are subtle references to Kyle Mooney leaving the show. So it's a really fascinating career to talk about. It's interesting. We did leave him for last because I think that he's the most intriguing potentially of the 4 that left in terms of how you look at his legacy on the show. Where does he sort of, rank in your head among the cast members that have been on Saturday Night Live? I'd love to talk it out with the panel tonight. So let's do our final thoughts on Kyle Mooney's legacy, and would love to know between all of you, how do you feel about him? You don't necessarily have to give me a number among all the cast members ever, but is he like an upper tier, middle tier, or lower tier cast member for you in terms of his legacy on the show? So Sammy, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, overall, and especially being able to like re-examine a lot of these, sketches over like the last couple of days, I think Kyle, like I said before, he was able to carve a corner for himself on the show, do things that, were different from the kind of Lonely Island pre-tapes, but kind of carry on that baton in the sense of, that you're going to get, every couple of episodes, a weird Kyle Mooney kind of peek into his mind. And I think that was always great to see. And, a lot of that material was cut for time, but it's great that, he was a cast member in the 2010s as opposed to the 90s, because we are able to see all those kind of sketches that didn't make the show. And a lot of those for me, like I consider like canon in a sense for like as an SNL viewer, like something that we didn't talk about. But like his new cast member sketch, the Adam Zeekman sketch, which is like another SNL universe sketch pre-tape that he did, like that is from the last couple of years one of my favorite sketches in general. So a really interesting career. I think he might be the type of person who, when he leaves the show, similar to like, obviously like he had a way longer tenure than like a Tim Robinson, but being able to like have his own show and really craft something that doesn't have to be like on NBC at 11:30 and can be super niche on a streaming service. I think, we'll see if he is able to, build upon like the stuff he did at SNL and take it to like somehow an even greater level. But, as far as like, what tier of cast member he is, I mean, of like the last like 10 years, he's definitely in my upper half of cast members, someone who, I was always like really excited to see get time on the air, even in a live sketch when he was like a utility player and had like a couple lines. Like I feel like he, made it his own.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what you were saying. Victoria, let's get your final thoughts on Kyle Mooney's legacy on Saturday Night Live.
I agree with Sammy in that he's probably my top half too when it comes to cast members. I will say during this retrospect, I think I took him for granted during his time there. And like he was underrated. Kyle Mooney is absolutely underrated. And I think, going through his previous work makes me realize that too, because they're all actually really funny. I think because his characters aren't, what's the word, like loud or, poppy, whatever. I think it sometimes gets dismissed or not as appreciated as they should be. So, but I think he's, left a great legacy. I'm going to miss his 80s and 90s, style and pop culture references and, his hair, of course, and and all that. I think he's left a mark in his own way. And I agree with Sammy as well of like really hope that we can see him in a streaming service doing his own thing, or joining forces with someone else. I think that's in his future, or at least I hope that that's in his future too. So my last words would be, Kyle, I'll miss you. You're underrated, and I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you as much as I should have during your time here. I love you forever.
Oh, that's very nice. Kirstin, what about you? How do you feel about Kyle Mooney's legacy at the show? To sum up your thoughts.
I agree that reflecting back on all of these has pushed him higher up my list overall. I agree with that. And Sammy, I echo that, when people leave the show, there's sometimes an obvious path for them. I don't know what that is for him, but I'm glad it's happened now because, to your point, they really wouldn't have known what to do with him even 10 years ago because he wouldn't have fit into one of these traditional sitcoms. But now he has a whole bunch of options for different streaming services where he can do something fearless and fun and that is very close to his style. I think in terms of legacy that people after him will be compared to him more than anyone realizes. That's how he'll live on is, very Kyle Mooney. And he's going to be referenced in that way for years to come.
That's interesting. Does anyone on the panel think that Kyle Mooney will ever host Saturday Night Live? Getting crickets.
I think it's really going to depend on, like what his career looks like. Like as much as I love Will Forte, like the fact that he hosted this season, I didn't always think was possible. So I think it just is going to really depend on like what he does after this. But I don't think he's definitely, of the people who left, is probably the least likely, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. Victoria, you think?
Not anytime soon, unless he has secret projects that we're unaware of that he'll soon promote. I hope so. It'll be a pleasant surprise if and when he does, but I don't think anytime soon, unfortunately.
Kirstin?
I mean, he got a lot of Lorne cameos, so there's some love there. Maybe he comes back as, you know, a cameo of some sort of his own. He fits, something else is going to happen in the news, and he will, just like, you know, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler did, come back and just nail a real person on the show, maybe. I agree. I think he's a little too zany to be a show host. But I'd love to see his face again on the show. I think he's always a friend of the show. Always, always. So we will see him again, just not as a host necessarily.
I agree. I think that if Beck Bennett, who to me is more likely to host one day, I think if Beck hosts the show, we're definitely going to see Kyle there. I think that would make a lot of sense. I wouldn't be stunned if we saw some sort of Bruce Chandling on SNL 50 at some point. But I don't think Kyle Mooney will host the show unless there's some major career turn or arc. For me, I would agree. Definitely an underrated career. I would have to say, if we're talking about pre-tape producers or pre-tape performers in the history of Saturday Night Live, to me, he's one of the best pre-tapers we've ever had on the show. I think if you factor in live sketch stuff, weekend update, all encompassing, really ranking him overall. It's hard for me to say that he like cracks the top tier or comes close to it. I think that, he's a very solid cast member. I think he's a very niche cast member. And if Kyle Mooney really works for you, he's always going to be one of your favorites. To me, if you go into the statistics, Kyle Mooney was in 564 sketches in the time at Saturday Night Live, in his time there. That's good for 20th all time or 19th all time among cast members. So that is a very high. I mean, obviously a lot to do with longevity, but he's right ahead of Will Forte and Tim Meadows. And I sort of think that those are really interesting comparisons. Obviously, listeners who know me know my love for Will Forte, but you sort of have to make the comparison in a way where Will was, to me, the greatest at what he did on the show. Kyle was really great at what he did on the show. Tim Meadows ended up, developing after his first 5 years of the show, ended up finding his way into that new cast. But they all had complications, I would say, in a way, with becoming these SNL greats. But then they found their roles, and they're going to be well remembered. So I love Kyle Mooney on the show. I think it was his time, and I'm glad that we get to celebrate everything that he did for 9 years on the show. And I hope the chat enjoyed our discussion of Kyle Mooney and our discussions of Kate McKinnon, Aidy Bryant, and Pete Davidson as well. So make sure to go back and check those out. Let's talk about what's coming up here at the SNL Network. So if you haven't heard, like I said, we did our draft last week where we talked about hosts that have never hosted the show before. That was really fun. So go back and check that out. You can vote on which team was the best on social media. Then next week, let me tell you about the show we have coming up next Monday night. It's going to be live and it's going to be very fun. It is me, Andrew Dick from That Week in SNL, and TJ Randolph. And we are going to have a lot of fun because we are going to do the first ever episode of the SNL Network's Point Counterpoint. And this will be really great. If you ever watch ESPN's First Take or one of those sports debate shows, that is what we are building next week. We're going to have a lot of topics that we are going to have TJ and Andrew Dick debate. They're going to have a certain amount of time on the clock. I'll try my best to moderate and put in my opinions, but we're going to have some really fun debate topics live next Monday night. We're going to try this out as a new show on the SNL Network to see how we can fit this into the schedule in season 48. And I thought it'd be fun to kick things off with some chaotic panelists with TJ and Andrew Dick. The following week, we are going to begin our patron podcast series where we're going to be counting down the greatest SNL characters of all time. That vote to get your input in will be available on social media later on this week. So make sure to vote for your favorite characters. We're going to be counting those down with our patrons at the SNL Network. And if you have watched tonight and saw Sammy and Victoria and Kirstin and you think you can podcast about Saturday Night Live, well, now is the time. So go to patreon.com/the SNL Network to become a patron and register to join us for the countdown, and you can podcast about the greatest SNL characters of all time this summer with me as we count those down. We're going to probably do the top 20 SNL characters of all time in a very fun series over the next few weeks. To find everything we're doing, make sure to find us at the SNL Network, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And of course, you can find me at Jon Schneider 24. And I would love to hear from the panelists what they are up to and where you can find them. So Sammy Kay, thank you as always for joining us. Great to get to talk to you in the middle of the summer. Where can the listeners reach out to you?
Yes, John, thank you as always to have me on the show. You guys can find me at that Sammy Kay on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Like John said, definitely check out the never hosted draft we did on the Superfan Takeover, as well as any of the other Superfan Takeovers that you have missed. And just for a little Kyle Mooney goodbye, I do want to tell everybody out there, if you have not seen Brigsby Bear, which is a movie that he wrote and I believe Dave McNary directed. It's a great movie. So if you're, going to miss Kyle on the show and you haven't seen it, definitely check that out. It's a lovely movie.
Yeah, I agree. Really, really fun. Victoria, thank you for joining us tonight. Always great to hear your thoughts. Where can the listeners reach out to you?
You can reach out to me on Instagram right here. Or if you're in the Detroit area, you can see me perform at Go Comedy on July 25th at 8 p.m. So
that's
what
exciting.
I'm up to.
Yeah, that's very, very fun and exciting. And thanks, John, for this comment in the chat. I love that. So, Kirstin, you were so fantastic with us. I know you were very experienced in podcasting, but it was your first time with us, and you did a fantastic job. Where can the listeners see everything that you're doing?
Well, thank you. I'm so glad that I was able to join. I'm on Insta at Kirstin Turnbull. I love clip forwards from SNL. I'll watch them all, share away. And oh man, I'm all out of cash.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Kirstin. And make sure not to spray your kid too hard with the hose when whenever they're acting up. So anyways, just want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat live on these Monday nights. It's always great to catch up with all of you over the summer. We will see you next time, everybody. Make sure to join us next Monday night for a very fun show. Have a good one.